Lahti will be carbon neutral by 2025, and our aim is to be completely emission-free by 2050. District heating and cooling has played a major role in the climate mitigation work of our city.
Damit werden die Ziele in Sachen der Umwelt- und Energiepolitik der Stadt Villach sehr, sehr gut mit Fernwärme unterstützt.
A key part of our green transformation is our collective district heating system. It plays a central role in the city today.
Vilnius is proud to have a well-developed district heating system which provides high-quality heat with the lowest impact on environment.
Tutto il tema della decarbonizzazione che una città come la nostra ha bene in mente come obiettivo per il futuro della sua rete di teleriscaldamento.
Il secondo ragionamento invece poggia sul fatto che dobbiamo avere un impegno morale ma concreto nei confronti.
Šajos modernajos laikos kļūst par priekšnoteikumu effektīvai politikai enerģijas jomā.
Uns eine deutliche Steigerung der Effizienz, aber vor allen Dingen auch sukzessive den Einsatz CO2-neutraler Energieträger.
In fact, our district heating system serves as a hub for reuse of whatever sources of energy we have available in the city.
Green transition of district heating will bring us closer to meet our climate goals.
Et puis à terme, je n'ai aucun doute, on arrivera à un réseau qui soit 100% renouvelable et de récupération.
Queste sono scelte molto importanti per una Milano.
We plan to have a complete fossil-free district heating system at the latest 2030.
Because, well, in the end, we're all connected.
After all, we're all connected.
We all are connected.
Après tout, nous sommes tous connectés.
After all, we are all connected.
Après tout, nous sommes tous connectés.
And we are all connected.
So many inspiring stories. The energy transition concerns everyone, as you know, and you just heard it. We are all connected. The success of the energy transition will highly rely on its democratic and inclusive dimension, and this at every level. This is especially true when looking at heating and cooling system, which must be sustainable, affordable, and accessible to all. I agree with the statement, cities have both the power and the responsibility to deliver the change we need. Welcome to all of you to the Celsius Summit 2021. Today and tomorrow, for 2 half days, we will talk and learn about cities, energy transition, and energy democracy. My name is Annette Gerlach. I'm a journalist here in Europe, in Strasbourg, and I'm absolutely delighted to be your host for this first afternoon. If you are active on the social media, please do not hesitate to post about our discussions. The hashtag is Celsius Summit with a C and an S in capital letters. Let me also quickly give you some simple housekeeping rules for our session today on Zoom. Please turn off your mic, turn off the cameras during your presentation, during the presentations. If you have any questions, we are very happy that you ask them in the chat. We will try, of course, to find some answers. And also note, please, that this plenary session is recorded. After a coffee break at 3 a.m., I will present you our roundtable panel, European Specialist on the Energy Transition. And at 4 o'clock, all of you are invited to participate. We are really keen and we are looking forward to your input. You will have the choice between 3 different breakout sessions, and we will finish this intensive first day of the Celsius Summit 2021 by presenting you the people behind the summit for some conclusion just before 5 o'clock. And just let me give you the little frame for what we are talking here about. Celsius, as you know, is an initiative founded by the European Union, which serves as a demand-driven collaboration hub for efficient, integrated heating and cooling solution, supporting cities in their energy transition to carbon-neutral systems. This year, the Celsius Summit is kindly hosted by the picturesque city of Strasbourg, by the way, by fantastic weather and blue sky. We are here in a place called the Lieu d'Europe, just a kilometer away from the European Parliament. You can see above the trees. Strasbourg is run by a green mayor and is quite ambitious in regard to the energy transition, with a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2050, as the European Union wants to have it for all cities. To achieve this, the city highlights energy democracy as a key factor for its success. To learn more about it, let me introduce you to our first speaker. He's a native Strasbourgian, deputy mayor of the city in charge of ecological transformation with a background of environmental law and years of experience in consulting green projects. He will speak to us in French, and we will provide translation, of course, for all of you via Zoom. So please welcome virtually here just besides me, Marc Hoffsess. Bonjour, Marc. Everything's fine? Donc, my first question to you would be, what inspired Strasbourg to host the Celsius Summit? Donc, qu'est-ce qui a motivé la ville de Strasbourg pour accueillir cette année le Celsius Summit, Marc?
Alors déjà, bienvenue à Strasbourg, à toutes et à tous.
Well, first of all, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you here in Strasbourg. And I would like to present the warmest greetings of the Mayor of Strasbourg and the President of the Metropolitan Region. We would like to welcome you here. We're looking into energy questions in this network, and we're looking into heating and cooling systems. So what was our motivation? Why have we decided to host this Celsius Summit? Well, first of all, Strasbourg is, of course, a European city. We have a European dimension. This is the European capital. It's the Europe of citizens that can have a voice here in the European Parliament and the Council of Europe, which goes beyond the European Union, which represents Greater Europe. And as such, it was perfectly logical for us to host this summit here in Strasbourg. It was a logical decision, and above all, as we are talking about energy democracy, this is a topic that is very dear to our heart. It's a crucial topic here in Strasbourg.
Peut-être vous pouvez nous donner un peu l'importance que c'est pour vous cette
démocratie énergétique. And tell us why democratic,
why the theme of energy democracy is so important to the city and for you.
Alors c'est un peu paradoxal parce que
I think it's a bit paradoxical because I think that ever since mankind has been around, Homo sapiens, energy is maybe the one thing that has been the most democratic. Well, we spent ages to master the fire and coal and iron, and today we find it perfectly normal that energy is always accessible at affordable prices. It's almost like tap water or waste management. This is something that we take for granted. We're just plugging in our devices and we get electricity, we get energy out of the wall socket. So we take it for granted. It's perfectly natural. It has become democratized over time. And I'm talking about the Western societies where most of us come from, of course. But paradoxically, we are now realizing that energy is getting ever less accessible and is getting more expensive, both from the point of view of costs of the financial burden involved, but also, of course, because of its accessibility and the input we have to, and the availability of natural resources, which means that we have to rethink the use we make of energy. And this is, of course, a great responsibility we feel. And I can talk on behalf of Strasbourg, but I think that the same holds true for the other members of the Celsius network. I think we need democracy and debate. We need to have participation. We need to have civic participation when such important matters are involved. And there are two different possibilities. It's autocracy or democracy, and shared solutions and an exchange on possible solutions. And I think that Strasbourg is the very place where we can have such a debate. And of course, this is a very current topic.
Aux événements sismiques provoqués par un projet de géothermie profonde.
We had a geothermal project which was supposed to provide a lot of energy we will need by 2050. So we had some earthquakes, so to say, literally speaking. And this has really caused some commotion here in France. And well, when you take a look at the role played by geothermal systems for our district heating systems by 2050, the question of of acceptability is, of course, very
important.
important.
There's a popular movement against geothermal solutions right now here.
Et donc, on va être amené
Geothermal technologies. Exactly. Thank you for giving us that background information, which means that we have to redefine our strategy. We have to get down to work and we have to look into this matter as of next year. And we would like to have a big public debate. We don't want experts to be the only one to have that debate, practitioners or people who are involved with this topic day in, day out. But we would like to have a broad public participation of citizens and different stakeholders, because I think that a lot is at stake. Of course, we have to develop solutions. It's about alternative choices that we need to consider. And of course, we also need to talk about the different uses of different applications. So when we talk about energy democracy, we have to talk about simple solutions, or we also need to make sure that we have energy efficiency. We need to make sure that we use as little energy as possible. So this is what we understand by energy democracy and our approach.
For this first introductional words. Before I will come to our next speaker, I would like you to get involved in some collaborational work with us here. Let's create together our first word cloud of the day, the word cloud, and I would like to invite all of you to answer to a very simple question. We'll do this together. The help will be by the site slido.com, as you can just see. Please go on slido.com and use the hashtag Celsius. You can also scan the QR code, who's just here on the Zoom screen right now. And all of this, the idea is, please, everybody's listeners to us right now, please try to find a spontaneous answer to the question, what is the first word come to your mind when you hear the expression energy democracy? Go, I only can say. And while we will wait for the first answers to show up on the screen, I would like to ask one more question to Marc, maybe a little bit delicate question, but still. Il y a une autre question que j'aimerais bien vous poser, Marc. La France est un pays qui continue à miser fortement sur l'énergie atomique. Quelle est la position de la
We've just heard about the most recent projects of France with regard to nuclear energy.
Nuclear energy, who is still very much pushed forward by the country of France, and I would like to know the position of the city of Strasbourg for this.
Alors nous mettrons évidemment le nucléaire parmi les solutions qui seront débattues.
Vous dites évidemment, pas évidemment pour tout le monde. It's not evident for everybody.
Ça, c'est la qualité du débat.
Of course, not everyone is in agreement, and maybe that's not the solution for everything, but that needs to be part and parcel of our democratic debate. I think that we have to take all different options into possibility, and as we have noted, and rightly so, nuclear energy, of course, has an important role to play in our energy mix today, and as such, we have to talk about it. Of course, this is maybe not necessarily the position presented by the Green Party or environmental parties. There are, of course, different reasons. On the one hand, there are difficulties in terms of supply and the different fuel routes you need. The prices, of course, is another aspect we have to take into consideration. And then, of course, we have to take a look at the afterlife, the end of line, the management of nuclear waste, and this is an aspect we must not neglect either. And this is something that we have to take into consideration. Of course, we've got access to nuclear waste, but we need to discuss what to do with the nuclear waste at the end of life. And that's, of course, a responsibility that comes with the use of nuclear energy.
So let's take a look on the cloud. The word who is clear, the most used by all of you is citizen participation. It's definitely a point of view we will stress today in our discussion, not only for this opening session, but also in our roundtable. It's also the other words coming to our mind is community, renewables, emancipation, engagement, price, prosumer and not consumer anymore, absolutely communities, everyone's responsibility, and user engagement and common ownership. Common ownership we also will talk about. Thank you very much for this first inspiring little word cloud. So let's kick off with the next speaker. He's also a man of great inspiration. His name is Ciarán Cuffe. He's from the Green Party of Ireland and a member of the European Parliament, where he sits in the Energy and Transport Committees. He also serves as the president of EUFORES, an European NGO that promotes the deployment of renewable energy sources and energy efficiency. The current corona situation made it unfortunately impossible for him to join us here today in Strasbourg, but I had the pleasure to meeting him online. And the first question I ask him, a little bit what I just do with you too, Marc, is what is his understanding about energy democracy?
Well, for me, public participation is central to energy democracy, and improving energy democracy is all about empowering citizens to share best practices and allow them to take back power over the energy sector. And I think this leads to fairer energy prices and practices for consumers. And energy democracy, it's going to be essential for the transition to a green economy. And the clearest examples of energy democracy that I've seen is with energy cooperatives. And energy cooperatives, they can be groups of citizens that come together to promote sustainable and renewable energy within their community through active citizen involvement. And the benefits of this model, they're clear from the outset. Citizens have their say directly through the governance of the cooperative. And as well as this, the cooperatives, they can provide independent and accessible technical support to the members and to the communities. And that they in turn, they become a trusted partner. So at their heart, energy cooperatives, they're all about communities, and they provide energy solutions that are tailor-made and adapted to local conditions. And I think what we see as well is that the rise of the prosumer, where the citizen is in control and can dictate a little bit more back to the utility or to the city what they want and what they wish to contribute from an energy perspective. So instead of being completely a top-down approach, it has an arrow going both directions. And I think that's a more democratic arrangement that can help us on the path to the energy transition.
It is for sure one of the most important parts is this involvement of the community. I totally agree with you. As you know, it's often said that heat is a local issue, especially in comparison with electricity. What do you think Europe on his level can really do, especially regarding to the European Green Deal, to impact this local issue of heat?
Well, you know, Europe is very active in this area. We talk about the European Green Deal, but now it's crystallizing into what we call the Fit for 55 package. In essence, it's the challenge of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 55% from the year 1990 to 2030. And there's a lot of work to be done in the decade ahead. So if we take the heating sector, for example, we will be revising the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and the Renewable Energy Directive. And within those revisions, we've a real chance to electrify the residual demand through renewable energy combined with heat pumps or efficient renewable district heating and cooling systems. And this also extends to transport, where we're calling for increased smart charging points. So instead of looking at buildings in one area and transport in another, the two of them are interconnected with charging points for electric vehicles tied into the homes where we live. So at a European Union level, we can offer incentives to replace old, inefficient heating and cooling technologies with modern, highly efficient and renewable solutions. And the perfect example here is with heat pumps. And so we need European Union funded grant support schemes for the installation of heat pumps. And this will act as a huge incentive for homeowners to invest in upgrading their heating systems to include this more sustainable solution. And look, it can't be looked at in isolation. Heat pumps should be part of a deep renovation or an approach that looks at the attic, looks at the windows, looks at a whole building approach, or indeed the neighborhood, approach to renovation. And I think member states, not Brussels, they need to be the drivers in decarbonizing the heating sector across Europe. And they need to empower, they need to support local communities in developing real plans on improving the living spaces that we call home. And the bottom-up approach would be a lot more effective than if we simply work off legislative initiatives in Brussels. So yes, Brussels is important, but don't think that Brussels is the only game in town. We've got to work at a regional level, a member state level, a local level, and empower the householder or prosumer themselves. That having been said, the EU does have a role in enabling local communities to make a transition away from fossil fuels. And in the revisions of the European Performance of Buildings Directive, we certainly will be calling for member states to phase out fossil fuel-based heating and cooling technologies as part of their national energy and climate plans. This is the NECPs. You know, some of the member states are doing it already, but there does need to be close cooperation at European, national, and local level. And once member states and local authorities show us their willingness to phase out harmful fossil fuels in their heating system, then the quicker we can move to ensure that there's a really swift action at policy level that can result in citizens making a switch to greener technologies like heat pumps and those other technologies.
Very good. The incentives of Europe certainly can make a difference in this very important issue. But let's go back to the local issue, because so you are from Dublin and you served in Dublin City as a councillor, especially with responsibilities for sustainable transport and climate change. So you know very well what's happened in Dublin. And in your country, there's a very high use still of gas and oil boilers for heating. But also you start really to integrate green electricity. A lot of it's happening there on the local level, including for heat network projects. Do you feel that things are really changing in Dublin and that the city?
Oh, I do. I think they are. You know, Ireland, it's a very windy country, which is good if you want to hang your laundry up to dry outside, but it's also good for the generation of electricity from wind. And in the space of the last 10 years, we've gone from maybe 10, 15% up to 35, almost 40% renewable energy, renewable electricity from the wind. And we want to bring that up to 70, if not 80% by the end of the decade. So that's a really ambitious target. And I think that will allow us to move away from gas and oil boilers for heating. And a lot of progress has been made in green electricity. Remember, we have to balance the grid as well. And that can be a bit tricky because we're not as well connected with interconnectors as, let's say, a country like Denmark is. So we'll see a lot more interconnectors to France and other countries in the years ahead. There's also a lot happening in local developments in and around Dublin. We have a lot of data centers, so we want to ensure that the waste heat from data centers is used for the heating of buildings. And indeed, we have a large waste to energy plant, an incinerator. And we spoke, when it was designed, we said we want to use the surplus energy to heat buildings. It hasn't happened yet, so we're trying to really push that out over the next few years. So I think things are changing, and I think Dublin is moving in the right direction. So look, it was a slow start, but there are, for instance, there are grants available for heat pumps from the state, from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. And there's a new grant of up to €3,500 for air source, air to water, or geothermal heat pumps. So I think there is movement happening. And I think there's a role there for local authorities and state agencies to inform people about the choices that they can make in a more sustainable direction. So this is all very positive. And I know, you know, I've spent a lot of the last 30 years as a member of the City Council in Dublin. We need to empower people by making available information, and we need to have better connectivity between what we're doing locally and nationally. And I think more communication would really help there. But we have a climate plan at a local authority level, and maybe we need to talk a lot more closely with consumers about what they can do, and also lead by example ourselves. We are doing a lot of that, but as always, local authorities, they're in a very powerful position when it comes to informing people, when it comes to telling the community, telling the neighborhood what's possible and bringing them on that journey together.
Right communication is without any doubt key in this issue. My last question to you, Ciarán Cuffe, would be, if there would be one priority on the way to carbon neutral systems regarding heat and cooling, what would it be from your point of view, one priority? Wow,
there are so many, but I think, you know, I was up in Glasgow for the COP26 climate negotiations not too long ago. And what came from that for me was ambition. We just need to increase our ambition, not just at a legislative level here in Brussels and in Strasbourg, here and in both of these cities where the Parliament meets, but this ambition has to translate down through the local authority and regional and member state level, and also to the consumer. And I think actually members of the public are ahead of the legislators in this regard. They want to see climate action. They look at their TVs and they see the wildfires, they see the floods, and you know, in Belgium, France and Germany, we've seen the awful experience of flooding that took lives last summer. So I think the ordinary person on the street, they want to see more ambition. And if we can translate that through into the Parliament, into other fora at the different levels, then I think we will realize our goals.
Thank you so much, Ciarán Cuffe, for the time you took to answer to this question, and I agree totally with you. Let's together increase our ambitions. Thank you and have a nice day.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Increased ambition. This could be, yeah, this should be the subtitle of the Celsius Summit. Yes, we can, and yes, we should be even more ambitious about the energy transformation to fossil-free energy sources. After this Irish member of the European Parliament, Ciarán Cuffe, I'm delighted to present to you our first female speaker, Julie Purdue. She's an engineer and Deputy General Director in charge of energy for AMORCE, a French network organization for sharing knowledge and information on the energy transition, territorial waste management and sustainable water management. So a real specialist of our question of the day. She's here in person in the Lieu d'Europe, and she will talk English to us. We are very delighted about this. Julie, the floor is yours.
Bonjour à tous, good afternoon. Yes, I'll try and make my presentation in English. Can you put up the presentation?
Yeah, the first slide will come up directly.
Okay, so I'll
just can start this. Well, here we go.
Yeah, okay, so you can go to the next slide. I'm going to make a presentation on district heating in France. First of all, a few words on AMORCE. AMORCE is the main network of French local authorities and professionals in France. We actually promote energy transition, but also ecology transition. We provide expertise, network to local authorities. We gather facts and figures. We publish reports, and also we participate in national debates on behalf of our members. We are today we gather about 1,000 members all over France, and we are based mainly in the city of Lyon. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on give you an overview of district heating in France. First of all, I should mention that district heating represents about 6% of the total heat supply, mainly in residential sector and tertiary sector. One should bear in mind that most district heating systems are publicly owned by local authorities, And local authorities are competent when it comes to creating and managing district heating systems. And this can be, most districts are managed under a concession agreement between the local authority and an operator. But you also have direct management of district heating network, which be possible. It's a possibility, and it's mostly chosen by local authorities that have smaller networks. And in that case, there's an in-house service which operates, manage, and carry out investments on district heating systems. Next slide, please. So you have here a few information on the energy mix and the carbon footprints of district heating system in France. As you can see, you have the energy mix in 2009 and the energy mix in 2020. And you can see the evolution in the energy mix. And this is really important because it shows that really district heating can be a really interesting solution in the energy transition. So you've got an increase in the amount of renewable and recovered energy, mainly biomass, and to a lower extent geothermal energy and other renewables. And naturally, the carbon footprints of district heating networks in France decreases every year, and so continually. So that is a really interesting. And at the same time, I didn't mention it before, we have about 800 district heating systems in France, and this is also increasing every year. To give you an idea, before 2010, we had about 300 district heating systems in France. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a bit complicated, but I'm going to explain it. I wanted to focus on the cost of district heating, the cost of heat for end users in France. I think that can be quite interesting. So basically, this chart is made of vertical lines. Each vertical line represents a network. The green lines is a network which uses over 50% of renewable and recovered energy. The brown vertical lines are district heatings that uses under 50% of recovered and renewable energy. So first of all, you see that there's quite a few, there are many green lines, which shows that we have a lot of district heating networks that use over 50% of renewable and recovered energy. Now you've got horizontal line. I want you to just look at the one in yellow. This is the average cost of heating deliveries. So it's a 73.5 euros.
Euros per month people have to pay for it?
Per megawatt.
Sorry, per megawatt, got it.
Hour.
Unit.
Yeah, and what is interesting also is to see the price of the networks that uses less than 50% renewable energy. It's 71, almost 72 euros. And the ones that use more than 50% renewable and recovered energy, which is 74. These are data from last year. If I had the data from this year, it would be different because, as you all know, there's been a price increase in fossil fuels. And that's my point is, I showed you this chart, but on the long run, prices of district heating using over 50% or more renewable and recovered energy have more a price which is more stable than the ones that use mostly fossil fuels.
May I just ask you one question, you to understand, but what I, as not a total specialist of this field, what I can see is that the district heating becomes more and more expensive.
No,
this is, I mean, there is an increasing price of energy, and also for district heating. This is not an exception if I see it well.
Yeah.
Energy will be less affordable today, tomorrow than it is today.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that is true.
And district heating is not an exception on this tendency.
No.
You maybe have just to underline also.
And even the use of recovered and renewable energy will not make it cheaper, but it will make it more stable.
Absolutely, not so like the gas prices nowadays.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So that's basically the point. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to speak about targets in France. So we had an energy bill was adopted in 2015, and it set really ambitious targets for the development of district heating and also cooling using renewable and recovered energy. So you've got a target in 2030 that you can see on this chart, but you've got also intermediate targets which are set up in multi-annual programming plans. So what you can see, I mean, you've got the data from up to 2020, where you can see in green the share of renewable and recovered energy, and in gray the share of energy using fossil fuels. And we drew up the line. You can see we're not on track to meet the 2030 objective, even though we make progress every year. So there's really a need to, I mean, for stronger effort to actually meet the 2030 objective. And
maybe I can quote Mr. Cuffe again: increased ambition. This is what we need if we want to join that.
Yeah, the ambition is there in France, but as you can see, in the current situation, we increase up to, I put it in the units that we use in France, 0.8 terawatt-hour per year, terawatt-hour per year.
A little bit technical, yes.
Yeah, and it's not enough. The rate of development needs to be 2 or 3 times more important. But anyway, the ambition is there in France. So now I'm going to speak about, next slide, please, the mechanism that exist in France to try and support the development of heating, district heating. So some of them exist in all European countries. You've got European funds and facilities, white certificates as well. What we have, and I'm going to speak about it just after in the next slide, is the Heat Fund, which is the main instrument to develop renewable and recovered heat in France. We've got also reduced VAT and reduced VAT, which end users can benefit from. It's a bit technical, but on the fixed the fixed share of the bill, but also the variable share of the bill, which the variable share depends on the consumption.
Absolutely. And which one has VTA reduction?
The end users which are connected to a network using over 50% renewable and recovered
very good.
Energy. There's also, I wrote it in France, Ma Prime Rénov', which is basically, can't say aid really, but support that households can get if they're renovating their house or their apartment and they include renewable heating system.
Absolutely, the réseau de chaleur, that they include
they
district
can,
heating in their renovation of the houses for a more, of course.
And I included crowdfunding, which is quite new in France, but it's starting to, I mean,
it's increasing of course, as a platform to support this kind of development.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Worldwide.
I'll speak about it after. So if I come back to the heat fund, and you can please if we can go to the next slide. So the heat fund is a national mechanism which is managed by our energy agency, which is called ADEME in France. So it was put in place in 2009, and it supports the production of heat based on renewable and recovered energy sources in the industrial sector, the tertiary sector, and also the housing sector. And nowadays, well, now the financial allocation is 350 million euros per year. That was increased a few years ago. However, even though you can see the figures that they are in France, but since the creation of this fund, the fund has supported over 6,000 projects, has given 2.6 billion euro, and the overall operation amounted to over 9 billion euro. So this is really a success story, if I can say that, and it has even been, it was even acknowledged by the Court of Auditors, the National Court of Auditors, as one of the most efficient support mechanism in France. Mm-hmm. However, it is not sufficient today to meet the objectives, and we hope that the fund is going to be increased next year. We're waiting for the government's decision. If I can go back to the following slide, I wanted to zoom on a few initiatives that we have that are ongoing in France at the moment. The first one is an awareness campaign targeted on local authorities. There was a national action plan to develop district heating and also cooling adopted by the government in 2019. It is composed of 25 actions, and the first one is to raise awareness and support local authorities that where district heating system could be interesting, but that haven't looked into that possibility yet.
To motivate them.
Yeah. And so we are involved in this action together with ADEME, the energy agency I spoke about just before. And so far, we have contacted 150 local authorities that have more than 10,000 inhabitants. And we are currently providing guidance to 80 of them. And some of them have launched a feasibility study. So this is really something that is, well, on the local level, trying to change things. So that was the first action I wanted to speak to you about. There's a second, please. So I haven't had time to translate it, but what is important to remember on this slide is that I spoke to you about at the beginning that district heating were owned by local authorities, and most of them are managed through a concession-based agreement between the local authority and an operator.
Sorry, if you say district heating, you also speak about the grid, or it's just the source of the
the grid.
The grid.
I speak about the production of
the whole installation.
The production of the plants and also the grid. And I wanted to stress the fact that there was a concession agreement model that existed, that was drawn up in 1982, and we've been working on a new version of this model for the past 2 years, and it's about to be published. And it's we did it AMORCE, also with the association that groups together all the private operators. And this is really an achievement, because basically this model gives guidance to set rule for service to consumers, security of heating plants, but also takes better into account all the issues at stakes regarding energy transition and renewables and efficiency of the district heating network. So
yeah,
this
if the last concept is from 82, there's definitely need for renewal, I would say. Yeah, yeah. You can say this, right?
Yeah. So yeah, so that's really something, and we're going to present it next month at an event I'm going to speak to you about in a few minutes. So that was the second action I wanted to talk to you about. Then I wanted to speak to you about zoning. In France, there's a possibility under certain conditions to allow local authorities to make it compulsory for buildings to connect to the district heating networks. And the situation nowadays, I mean, currently, is that the network has to use at least 50% renewables of recovered energy. The heat deliveries have to be metered, and there needs to be a financial balance in the district heating public service. And under these conditions, today, the local authorities can decide to basically set up a zoning area whereby buildings that are undergoing extensive renovation or new buildings will have to connect to the networks. The 2019 energy law has changed this, and now zoning is going to become systematic as from next year for all district heating networks that comply with these conditions. So this is really
an extension, and it's a very good measure.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah. I mean, we've pushed it. We
advocated for
it. Advocated for it based, of course, on what our members, local authorities wanted, and we are waiting impatiently for the decree to be published in the coming weeks on this measure. So this is really a change, because today we've got the gas network and district heating, and sometimes there's a lot of competition and on them, and it's quite complicated.
I know it's clear where the priority is.
Yeah.
I got it.
And the final measure, well, the final point I wanted to talk to you about is the involvement of consumers and citizens in district heating, the development of district heating. So there's a lot of positive points to that, but so far not much has been done in France to that extent. But we've got more and more requests from our members, our local authorities, to try and
nationwide publicity or awareness campaigns.
Yeah, and it goes beyond communication. It's also involving the citizens in the financing and the governance of
real democratic energy.
Yeah, and I mentioned it there. You've got crowdfunding, but you've got also shareholding, ownership, operation, and all these possibilities. We are working on them, and the Ministry of Environment in France has also acknowledged the fact that that's a very important issue, and there's a steering group at the national level, which we are part, which is working on that.
For living in France, I would say we can't say it's yet a part of the national discussion. It is not yet, and
No.
we have to push this issue forward. It's not only means idealism, but also there are some advantages and some real involvement. You can make a difference with your input into this transition, and I think, yeah, awareness definitely need to be raised in France about this issue. Fantastic.
So yeah, it's going well. It's starting little by little.
Let's go for you. You talked about an event. Maybe the next slide.
Yeah,
if it's okay with you.
Next slide. If you've
Yeah,
got a few
just 3 more minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to show you that because this is a French initiative. We have a French district heating award that we award every year. So it's an initiative from AMORCE, but with also the National Energy Agency and also the Association of District Heating Operators. And we award this label for green district heating networks, which are also competitive cost-wise, and which also try and involve citizens.
The three criteria to be the winner of the Eco-Réseau edition 2020.
Yeah, and the 2021 awards are going to be given during the Renewable Heat Week, which is the next slide, please, which is happening the 7th and 8th of December in Paris.
And virtually, probably, if it's hybrid at least.
Yeah, well,
we will see the evolution of the.
Yeah, that's going to be tricky, but we just hope.
Semaine de la chaleur renouvelable. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. So that is that's really well, that's our main event. Just a few words of conclusion, if I may, because I've presented to you something quite, positive. How France is trying to just move forward. However, as you mentioned it before, we are French energy production is very much nuclear
and
orientated.
It will be with the next president too. Doesn't matter who it will be.
And based on the recent declarations of our president, it is still.
It's still a part of the future of it. The opposite to Germany.
And also, we've had recent regulations that have been adopted for new buildings and also for existing buildings, which basically.
You mean plants?
No, for new buildings.
Oh, buildings? No, you're not talking. Really buildings. Sorry.
New buildings, tertiary buildings, but also housing, and we've got also regulations for existing tertiary buildings, which promote heating solutions based on electricity, and also heat pumps without any targets on heat pumps efficiency. And we are trying to advocate for the fact that solutions based on electricity have their place, but we also need to focus also on renewable energy solution. Heat.
If I get it well, Julie, you want to say that there are heat systems that are sold here who are not efficient because of this idea that France is so much involved in nuclear energy.
Yeah.
Energy won't be a problem, if I can say so. This is, of course, not what we want.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not carbon neutral in every case. Absolutely.
Exactly. And
we have to be very, very precise when we talk about heating system, if they're efficient or not. Just having a new heating system is not enough. It has also to be efficient.
Yeah. And my last point is also that there's a lack of general awareness in France on what district heating is and the advantages of district heating. If you ask somebody on the street what renewable energy sources are, they will speak about wind.
Wind, sun, solar energy,
and but not district heating with biomass and
les réseaux de chaleur. Just for the vocabulary, we're talking district heating, réseau de chaleur, and in German it is Fernwärme, heat who comes from far away. All this means the same thing, and it definitely needs some awareness rising.
Yeah.
This we got it. You at the end, Julie? Thank you so much for this explanation, Julie Purdue. So you got it. She talks on behalf of AMORCE, this very important network here in France. In less than 10 minutes, you will have the opportunity, or we will have the opportunity to chat a little bit, and I also will see which questions are in the chat. But before, let me introduce you to Julien Joubert. He's also an engineer and project manager of energy systems and planning at Energy Cities. I think the most of you know this wonderful institutions, if I can say so, Energy Cities, special focus on district heating. Please, Julien Joubert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thanks a lot for inviting me. If we can have the slide. So just in a quick word, Energy Cities, we are a European network of cities and local authorities. In part of this community, local leaders can share, inspire, and learn from each other. And we showcase tangible alternatives deployed by municipalities. We also advocate for change to political and economic governance at all levels. We are also leader of the office and consortium in charge of 2 initiatives financed by the European Commission, the Covenant of Mayors initiatives, and the European City Facility. Yeah, as it was a bit mentioned already, the European Union is facing a democratic and climate crisis. Can we have the next slide, please? Here you can see the average turnout for parliamentary election in member states across EU, and you can see that there are less and less participation in votes in EU. So this is not new. We see also some tendency about authoritarian and populist action across the EU, let's say. And this is an issue also for the climate crisis, because we will have also difficult choice to make, and they will need to be done democratically. There is also of course, a climate crisis, and also Julie mentioned that we are not on track to achieve the target for 2030 or later. Yeah, this is also fueling the democratic crisis, because there are some also sometimes criticism toward democracy, saying it's not quick enough, and so on.
Of course, we talk about energy democracy, but the democracy itself is very weak. They have a problem with energy democracy. This is absolutely clear.
Yeah, and it needs to also, we need to reinforce democracy probably also to achieve the climate,
totally
tackle the climate crisis. And so what cities are doing to achieve both of this. If we go to the next slide. First, but they are involving citizens in elaborating a heat strategy. Marc mentioned that at the beginning. Here you can see also a picture of a citizen involvement exercise by the city of Delft in the Netherlands has done to phase out natural gas. And this is really also important, because we need to do collective choice. It will not be possible to offer all kind of solution, decarbonization solution to every household. Sometimes if we decide to develop district heating in a network, in an area, sorry, in a district, then of course, almost all the area need to connect to this district heating so that it's a viable solution. So there are a little gesture, because just your mic is a little bit frotting up. Sorry.
This will be much better. I'm sorry, this is a very technical intervention. And here we go without frotting, I hope so. No frottage anymore. Up. Tell me if it's better. Thank you.
Okay. Is it okay? Right.
Très bien. Pardon. Allez-y.
And of course, having this citizen involvement exercise and elaborating the strategy all together with citizens, it's also reinforcing the social fabric and the link between citizens, which is also really important to increase the resiliency of the community locally. What cities are also doing is supporting citizens to produce renewable energy. Here you have an example of the city of Eeklo, but you will hear more about that in the session afterwards, in the next session. So I will not present that example, but it's really important because citizens need to be involved in the project to also benefit from them directly, to be involved in the governance, and also studies show that citizens involved in renewable production projects tends to have a lower consumption of energy. So they are more careful regarding their energy consumption, and it's really important to decrease the consumption to achieve the target. What cities are also doing, if we can go to the next slide, is that we are supporting citizens for retrofitting their houses and reduce their consumption through a one-stop shop, which provide advice and support and financial subsidies. It's really important because at the moment, the market for the renovation is not efficient. It's not really easy to access for example, the financial support. I mean, doing a renovation project, especially of a condominium, for example, is quite complex. You need to involve different companies. You need to have also some technical backgrounds and so on. So it's not accessible to every citizen. And if we are not one-stop shop, local services to support citizens to do so, it will not happen, let's say, by itself, and we need to move forward for the renovation, because at the moment renovation rate is not sufficient, and it's needed to provide really targeted support, because it's a multi-dimension. If you want to refurbish your buildings, people may face poverty, people may face different issues, so it has to be really tailor-made, and it's a multi-dimension issue.
Just one question, you talk about financial incentives. Maybe there are also some ideological incentives we can think about. I mean, convince and speak with people of the need of a better management of our energy in the future. There's also, at least from my French-German point of view, I would say it's not done sufficiently right now.
Yeah, but this needs to be done very, closely to people. You need to go to see them, one-stop shop.
Door to door.
Exactly. If you want it to work, you need to be there when people are available. So you need to be available sometimes late and so on. So it's really kind of local service. You cannot do that from the capital, let's say. So it's something cities are doing, but they need more support to do so.
Absolutely.
Because it's efficient, but it's resource intensive, let's say.
Absolutely. But it's worth it.
What next slide, please? So what cities are also doing is like mapping local renewable resources and developing a heat transition roadmap. And that's really important because local resources in all national and EU scenarios, they are quite underestimated. Also like solar, thermal energy, geothermal energy, waste heat, they are really underestimated, the potential that they can bring to the transition. So this mapping needs to be done locally. And of course, the heat, the roadmap there need to be done locally, because the local factors are key. For example, if you install district heating and cooling, like the cost of putting the pipes in the ground can vary a lot between different cities according to the geology and the underground, for example.
Absolutely, a variable factor.
Exactly. So if to be achievable, let's say, and realistic, it needs really to be done locally. We are part of a project, a European project called Decarb City Pipes 2050, and we are working with 7 cities, including the city of Vienna, who are working on the supply side, the infrastructure, and the demand side to develop heat transition scenarios. Next slide, please. One word regarding data platform and open data policy. I think it's really important because if we want to achieve the transition, we need to have some trust, and third, it needs some transparency, and we need to have the same data, the different stakeholders, and the city can really develop this platform. They are doing so, and trying to push for open data policies so that data are accessible across the community, because we are in a learning process on how to do the transition, and we need to share the
best practice.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And as the energy market is quite divided, there are different stakeholders and so on. Everybody is speaking about the energy integrated system, but if we want to achieve that, we need to have the different stakeholders around the table and sharing the data together. And that's also what cities are trying to do. Next slide, please. So the Commission proposed a Fit for 55 package, and we are quite happy with.
Just maybe some words of explanation. It's for 2030, and it's a kind of getting into the mood for 2050 for be carbon neutral in Europe. This is the Fit for 55 package, just that we understand this 55% less greenhouse emissions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just to make it clear.
So it's a legislative package proposed by the European Commission to achieve the EU target. With Celsius, Federain, and DHCT, we published a manifesto in spring to trying to influence a bit the package proposed by the Commission about what cities need to achieve a fossil-free heating and cooling transition. We are quite happy to see that in the proposition from the Commission, there is an increased recognition to the local levels. For instance, local authorities are mentioned as having an important role in planning and facilitating the recovery of waste heat. It's also mentioned that in the Energy Efficiency Directive that member states shall encourage regional and local authorities to prepare local heating and cooling plans, meaning that it's seen as an efficient tools. And very importantly, it's said that member states should support regional and local authorities to the utmost extent possible by any means, including financial support and technical support schemes. And that's really important if we want this heating and cooling plans to be efficient. For the moment, it's just a proposition from the Commission. And of course, we want this to be improved and go further in the final version of the text, which will be adopted. Next slide, please. So what we can see is that, in fact, because the local level is the best placed level, let's say, to do the transition, in fact, it's the local authorities who are implementing EU and national policies to achieve the target. I listed here again what cities are doing, but they are doing more. They are doing the urban transformation project to develop positive energy district. They are setting ambitious buildings rule, for example. They are producing renewable energy by themselves. And all this, we can say, it's kind of a public service of energy, which is local, which is for and with citizens, and also with stakeholders, because it's like district heating system, they cannot be developed without a city. So also for companies, it's really important that cities have the means to do all these actions, let's say. Next slide, please.
Just can I ask one more thing? I'm just thinking about this. Nobody mentioned right now that this is also maybe job creating systems. And maybe this also has to be a little bit more in the focus, because people earning money with the energy transition, and we are living in a capitalistic system, so there's nothing bad about that. So there's also a job creation. There is possibility to find new resources in your region if you get involved in this, because you can get paid to be a part of the transition. Maybe this also has to be stressed a little bit more, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of jobs to be created locally, and probably, cities have a role to be a catalyst of all this transition, which in return will create more jobs in the territories.
It looks like right now is especially the consulting side who is increasing. A lot of people need to consult the cities to give plans, but I think afterward there are new jobs who lure at the horizon. So this is an interesting point also. I think we do have to talk about it. But please go on with your presentation.
So this, sorry, local public service of energy also, is a service that cities are providing to the entire community, I would say. Next slide, please. But there are no public policies without workforce, and sorry for the misspelling here. But if we take another public policy, which is a health policy, I looked in my city. I'm living in France, a bit more than 100,000 inhabitants, and only in my city there are like more than 100 general practitioners, doctors, and I'm speaking here only about general doctors, but across EU, if you look at the data, there are about 300 and 600 practitioners, doctors per 100,000 inhabitants.
Mm-hmm.
and they are here, they are available for people when they have a need, and to implement this health policy across EU, let's say. And we need the same locally. We need people available to make the transition. On the right side, you can see the implementation costs for municipalities in the Netherlands of the climate agreement. In the Netherlands, cities have a role to play to implement the climate agreement, so to achieve climate neutrality, and there were an estimation of the cost needed for municipalities to do all this action they have to do, and you can see that the cost will increase a lot for cities. And what's really interesting, for example, is if we speak only about heating buildings, let's say, and heating and cooling, in a city about 100,000 inhabitants, it's estimated they will need around 20 staff members to achieve the building transition in 2024, so it's tomorrow, and about 35, even maybe more, in 2030. So there needs to increase the staff capacity in cities to achieve the
job creation side, exactly.
Exactly, yeah. Next slide, please.
Yes.
So again, we started to speak about that, but we need stable and long-term financing to cover staff costs of cities to achieve a climate neutrality. We need to go out of this call for proposal, let's say, way of doing that cities are answering call of proposal to get money and to implement project on the ground. And then after the project is finished, there is no more financing. Is not with this short-term view.
Long-term view about
exactly.
this process, of course. I think it's a learning process. Everybody is inside, but we have to increase our ambition again and again. I just can
and give us a mean of our ambition, let's say. Like if I take again the example of the city Wannsee in France, we have supported 2,000 dwellings refurbishment in the last 8 years, but there are 62,000 dwellings in the city, so we need to go faster and have more staff to support citizens to take this step. Next slide, please.
And I suppose you're slowly coming to an end, Julien?
Exactly, that's
Wonderful.
my last slide.
Great.
And my question, if it's not cities who are doing the different action presented, the question is who? I mean, like if we take citizen cooperatives, they are doing great job, and I know a lot of examples of citizen cooperative doing a lot of good things and impressive things, but can we really rely on volunteers, people doing that a part of their job to achieve the transition? And my answer would be no, and we need professional and we need trained workforce in city to deliver these public services, which will benefit
to frame all these other
anyone.
People who want to get involved. Absolutely.
Exactly, and this will allow to tackle democratic and climate crisis by involving citizens very, very deeply.
Wonderful. This was the last slide. Thank you so much, Julien Joubert. I can hear the applause through Zoom after your presentation. And while you were listening, we have two first questions in the Zoom, and I'm very happy to ask them to you. Can making heat planning for cities mandatory in the EU be a success or important factor in achieving the heat transition? So l'idée, c'est est-ce que si ça sera obligatoire de faire la transition énergétique au niveau de l'Union européenne, est-ce que ça sera la bonne voie pour faire de tout ça un succès? What do you think about it? Mandatory. Here we talk about involvement, participation,
Alors, si la planification
to involve people, and here the idea is to make it mandatory, so imposing it in a certain way. What do you think about this? You're on the field and you have experience with this.
Alors sur une certaine incitation à ce que il y ait à l'occasion des permis de construire, par exemple, une incitation à se connecter au réseau de chaleur existant,
Yeah, I think that we can use certain incentives to get connected to a district heating grid. And when we were last reviewing our local plan, we were also allowing for such possibilities. And we have been offering this around the existing district heating grids.
Bien sûr, il faut de plus en plus de clients.
And of course, we need to make sure that this is balanced, and we need to make sure that we take the demand of consumption into consideration. We've integrated this in our local plan, but this was based on incentives.
On examinera et le promoteur sera amené à examiner la possibilité de se connecter.
The promoter has to look into different possibilities, including the possibility to get connected to the district heating. Right now, we do not have a legal basis. Julie said this, and rightly so, we don't really have a legal basis. And we have to modify our current structures. We need to have some public debate. Maybe we can't talk to each and every citizen, but we need to talk to the entire ecosystem, the civic engineers, the architects, the promoter, the developer, in order to make sure that they can all have a say and be involved.
Très bien, donc pas vraiment une forte idée de proposer ça avec des incentives, comme on dit en anglais. So, but what do you think about the idea of making it mandatory?
Et que pensez-vous de l'idée de rendre ça obligatoire?
Well, I think it's not a yes or no answer. If I look back, we had municipal elections last year, and basically
it was a green wave.
Exactly, and
France.
I think I live in Lyon. It's a green mayor.
Strasbourg is the first time a green mayor.
And Besançon is also a green. And I think this is coming from the people. The people want
a greener policy.
Yeah, they want jobs, of course, and all that, but they also want a greener policies, and they want their cities to change. And I think that's, we can't, we have to
impose it. We can impose it.
Yeah, and that is coming, and that is very different from the 2014 elections. I mean, we know the real evolution. I think it's important to have some measures mandatory. I think the zoning of district heating and
this is an important top-down measure.
However, we must bear in mind, I spoke at the end about regulations and objective which favor electricity solutions, and sometimes you see what comes from the top doesn't necessarily meet,
especially in France, with the revolutionary spirit in this
what
country.
Local authorities want, because
Absolutely.
Local authorities they have, you know, different local resources, different ways of functioning. Things can work for some cities and not the others.
So we come back to the idea that local is the most important, and mandatory can't be the solution. It has the top down. There are some framework can be done, but it needs to be a bottom up movement. By the way, you're right. The municipal election here in France, there was a big green wave, but let's wait for the next one. They have also to deliver for life quality, etc. So we will see how the citizen will evolve. Let's hope that it goes greener and greener, not only party-wise, but I mean that all parties get inspired of green policies. Maybe your answer to this question of mandatory or not from the EU, even they propose, but it's kind of not realistic, but for the idea?
Yeah, I think Julie is right. It's not a yes and no. We survey our members across Europe about what they think if the EU or a member state makes heat planning mandatory for them. And what we see is that almost all our members, they are already keen to do so, because first, but it's become mandatory. First, some of them are already doing it. And they are keen to do so, but if they have the means to do it really, so meaning the staff force, meaning also the access to data, because there are a lot of barriers about the access of data. And even in the eastern part of Europe, we see a new generation of city staff really keen to do things, more things.
Change,
yeah, exactly.
Yes, implement change.
Exactly, but they need the support of the member states to do so. And if heat planning is becoming mandatory for local authorities, it's great because there will be more cities doing it all together. They can exchange more, but the tools need to be provided. Access to data needs to be provided. There are good examples, like in Germany, in the Baden-Württemberg region, they make it mandatory heat planning for all cities across, I think it's 20,000 inhabitants. But at the same time, in the law, it's written that, okay, cities can access the data from the utilities to do so. They are
so the frame is set.
Exactly. They receive financial support. They also get advice regarding the tool they can use and so on.
Yes, yes.
And this, if the conditions are good, I mean, cities are more than welcome to do already that. But what we need to also don't put too much prescription in what it has to be done.
Mandatory means also sometimes just refusing because it's an imposing, so it's better to make it on a democratic basis.
Yeah,
right?
They need to have room of maneuver at the local level to do this and not add an additional burden. Like in France, some cities were already doing energy master plan. This master plan could count as the mandatory heat planning that the EU would like them to do, for example, so that they don't do again what they're going to do, but with a different name.
Yes, the situation are too specific that you can make one plan for everybody. And as you say, the local authorities, they really know what's needed. Let's come, before we come to our coffee break, to our second question was asked in the chat. Which incentives are strongest to get citizens engaged in the energy transition? From your personal experience, and then we do together another word cloud. So stay with us just before the coffee break. So a quick answer to this idea, just give me a list. What are the strongest incentives for citizens to get involved after your experience from mayor and from consulting and specialized fields? What would you say? Marc, no idea right now?
Je crois qu'il faut être... Si, moi j'ai bien une idée. Hein,
Pardon.
Yes, I do have an idea.
Moi, je le mettrais à 50% parce que c'est le niveau de l'action et de la...
Ah non, pardon, on n'est pas à cette question. C'était the question from the chat. L'idée, c'est quelles seront les meilleures façons d'impliquer les citoyens dans la transition énergétique? Ce n'est pas encore la question. C'était un slide. Non, on va le faire tout de suite dans une minute, mais d'abord un tour de réponse. Comment on peut motiver le mieux les citoyens pour être impliqués dans cette transition énergétique?
How can you involve
the citizen
évidemment,
déjà
into that energy transition? The answer.
I am citizen, I'm not interested in this. Just transparency is not enough to get me moved. What else?
La transparence ne suffit pas.
Okay, but this is more for the professionals in the area. It's still not the
pour les
citizens.
particuliers aussi. Un particulier qui a besoin, par exemple, le particulier qui veut s'engager dans un projet, quel qu'il soit,
to be committed,
il ne doit pas courir devant sa Pilate.
Association, il faut qu'il ait un endroit où il reçoit
They need a
l'information, les
place
solutions, etc.
where they
les solutions
get the information.
financières, etc.
Okay,
Et ensuite,
transparency, one source of information.
Et ensuite, l'aide financière, la facilitation de l'aide
Incitation.
Of course, financial support.
I think we need to, it's difficult to say in English, to...
Say it in French, I'm helping.
Leur donner envie, en fait.
Okay, to create willingness.
Yeah, I mean, we need to tell them the story
about it.
Yeah, exactly. Stop telling them that, I mean, we're all going to die in, in 50 years.
Yes,
and that's the end of it.
A positive story.
Yeah, and if we've got this positive story and we can do it together, and there's a real challenge and there are different solutions and...
Good. Positive. Last point to add, Julien, before we go to our next World Cloud.
Yeah, very quickly, give them the possibility to be involved in the governance and the ownership. I mean, Julie mentioned participation, but active participation to be part in the decision of the infrastructure that they are concerned with. And you will hear about the example of Eeklo later, but it's
don't make them feel them helpless, but empower them, empowering the citizen. Thank you very much for this input. So just before we all drink a very deserved cup of tea or coffee, Let's try another word cloud still on slido.com. If there's somebody came too late, just go on slido.com, you use the hashtag Celsius or you scan the QR code. So this time it's the question is quite specific, and I think the answer is a kind of feel it already. On which level actions will be most efficient to ensure energy transition? Well, if you listened carefully to our three speakers, I think it's, well, yeah, here we go. Local level wins with 77% and national level only gets 23%, EU level, no points. But I think it is totally what it is right now. It has to start at least locally. This is what all the people participating today at this Celsius Summit 2021 are thinking, definitely the total majority. And I think it is a very interesting knowledge, I would say, even after this first discussion, it has to start locally. Would you agree with this result, all of you?
I agree.
Yes.
At the same time, I think the EU level is very important to set a framework.
Yes.
And you also to
national and EU frame, but the action, I think, will be taken locally. We all agreed about this. This will be the last word for just 15 little minutes. There will be a video with more inspiring stories for you while waiting for us coming back exactly in 15 minutes. Have a wonderful coffee or tea break. See you soon. Hello, everybody. I hope your coffee was as good as mine. Here in the Lieu d'Europe, who hosted the Celsius Summit, who hosts the Celsius Summit 2021. So we are about to start a roundtable discussion, but just let me give you again some introductional words. There will be, unfortunately, no silver bullet to decarbonize heating and cooling systems in Europe. Considering the different and sometimes opposed interacting perspective, one question arises: how can cities ensure that heating and cooling systems are efficient, sustainable, and democratic? And how to accelerate the process? Overcoming these challenges will be key to reach the European climate targets on time. As you know, and as we heard already in the first round of this first session of the Celsius Summit, the proposal of the European Commission is to cut greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030, the so-called Fit for 55 package. And all this to aim the aim is to set Europe on a responsible path to become climate neutral by 2050. In this roundtable discussion, who is about to start, we'll get a few examples on concrete actions leading to sustainable energy transitions with the local community's acceptance and engagement. We heard this already this morning, is definitely key. We will listen to Bob Deslier, who he talks about energy as a local product with local added value and local ownership in the Flemish region of Belgium. We also will have the pleasure to welcome Astrid Madsen, independent consultant. You saw already briefly in the introduction video at the beginning of our afternoon, and she will talk about the importance of the end user acceptance and about how to enable participation and willingness to participate. And last but not least, we will be delighted to welcome Lise Debbaut's presentations. She will highlight the power of the citizens in the heat strategy of the city of Bruges. Welcome to the three of you. I can't see you now, but I suppose you are there. Maybe we can share the screen of the three speakers. You have to get your video on, please. Bob, Astrid, and Lise, this would be great. So we could see you. I think it's a question. You can see me, I can't see you. Did you put on your camera, Astrid? Oh, Lise,
yes,
I don't know who.
Yes. Both of us did.
Okay, they are all, you can see them all, this is wonderful. So welcome to the three of you. Thank you so much for your participation in this roundtable. Before our discussion, I would like to ask you to present to our virtual audience and briefly your field of expertise. Let us kick off with Astrid Madsen. As mentioned, you are today, Astrid, an independent strategic advisor for climate and energy. So you are translating technical and economic research into policy and action plans to realize the energy transitions. Before this, you have been working for the city of Rotterdam. This is why you have been in the video before, in the Netherlands for 20 years, where you also used to be a strategic advisor for energy transition at the city. You know, so we can say, you know, the whole range of stakeholders for a successful transitions. And we are very keen to learn more about you because you will concentrate your first speech on the role of the end user. Astrid, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this nice invitation. I will start sharing my screen. Let's see if it works. Share, there we go. And I think everybody sees it now. So I'm just going to talk a bit about end user engagement and acceptability from a perspective of, well, actually the city and any other project owner that wants to sell the product of district heating. But let me start with the first two key questions in doing so is actually how do you enable participants to be part of the system, but also how to create willingness. And I would say the first question, many people always answer. They look at, you know, affordability, do they have the knowledge? But the second question, the willingness, sometimes is forgotten. And this is about sense of urgency. Why me? Why me now? But also about sustainability and reliability. Is the fair price, you know, and this basically is all about trust. So this is really important in engaging end users. So the big question then is, of course, how? So there's some key elements to look at, and I'm just going through it. First, look at the bigger picture. So if you're going to address a person at home and he has a big hole in the street, and he's called the city about it 10 times, and you say, hi, I'm going to talk about district heating, that person is not going to talk to you about district heating. It's going to talk about the hole in the street. So you have to know what's going on. You have to look at the bigger picture. The other thing is you have to have some knowledge. You need to know what are the options, what is the spatial impact, how is the energy system working, and especially, obviously, you need to know the end user. And not all the end users are the same, so you have to really think about who lives there and what are the rewards and temptations for people to move, but also what are the barriers and blockades. And this is just a small example of a subsidy for a case where subsidy was given for insulating the attic. And what happened is that it didn't work. So they raised the subsidy, basically they raised the award, but it didn't work. It was only when they looked at the barriers, the blockades, when they found that cleaning up the attic was really a problem. And when they put that in the option of subsidy, suddenly the subsidy was used. So you really have to look at both elements in trying to engage end users. So when you have that knowledge, you start to make a plan. And that you can do together with the citizens, or you can also do some homework in advance. But in the end, you need to have sort of a strategy of what do you do, where and when. This is a part of the sense of urgency. Why me? Why now? And then you also have to have an approach, which is how are you going to do it? So what is the technical solution financially, but also socially? What do people think? What do they want? What do they need? And what are the opportunities? And what is your role? Are you going to coordinate it, orchestrate the transition top down? But what about bottom up initiatives, like grassroots initiatives? How do you balance them? And sometimes you probably have areas where you just have to facilitate because people have a plan already and want to work together. And sometimes you have to do much more orchestrating from top down. And that's each time a thing you need to think about. And you have to really define your role and define your requirements, and those two elements, just being clear in what you want to do and how are you going to meet sustainability or affordability. It needs to be clear because people need to trust the solution you're coming up with. And this all needs to be translated into a consistent and clear approach. And clear approach doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. Clear approach can also be is that you don't know the answers and you're going to look for it. And it's going to take another 2 years to do so. But you have to be clear in that process each time over and over again. And then in the end, if you want people to trust you, you have to have 3 key elements in it. It has to be democratic in some sort of way. So people need to be able to have a say in it. It has to be transparent. People need to understand, you know, okay, this is a fair proposition for me and fair to each other. And it has to be realistic. And I think if you do all those three things, you have a storyline which helps you to engage end users. And they are not only able, but also willing to move forward. So this is basically a story about trust. And with that, I would end my presentation.
Thank you so much. This was high dynamic and totally clear, Astrid.
Good.
So, so trust is very important, some sense of urgency. This is what I got from what you said. And also adaptation of the local specific situation. You can't make a general plan. You have really to look into especially the barriers. Thank you so much. We will talk about this, but let's move on first to Bob Deslier. Bob, you will show us that a big success story for energy transition can also take place in a small city with a small budget and only people working half-time, because exactly what happened in your city of Eeklo in Belgium, a city of 20,000 inhabitants between Ghent and Bruges. Julien Joubert, who just talked this morning, showed already the example of your city, because you're really a lighthouse example for a good energy transition. Eeklo's solution of energy transition and district heating is based on wind turbines and a cooperative spirit. It all started with the rebranding of energy as a local product, but please, Bob, tell us the whole story.
Hi, all right. Thanks, Annette, and thanks for joining. I'm just going to share my screen, and then we can start a small presentation I got.
This is Bob is not this is Lisa who is on the screen. Yeah, here we go. Sorry, Bob, go on.
All right, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so you can understand me, right?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely perfect.
Okay, perfect. So well, I like to begin where the last session before the coffee break ended. So the need for a positive story. And for that, I think that we need to think of energy not as an invention of the Industrial Revolution. Only 0.007% of all the energy we get from the sun is fossilized. Evolution is actually just about how successful we are in gathering energy from our surroundings. And fossil fuels actually merely changed the space and the time dynamics of energy. And it's just a simple fact that it is this knowledge that has actually helped us to frame and to bring these other perspectives of energy into our transition. And as Annette Astrid just mentioned it, it is about creating different perspectives on this energy transition that has made this possible. And I was very fortunate that I was able to join this transition story of our city, because it has already been started in 1999, actually when I was still in high school. So, but I think I added a couple of things and to accelerate and to catalyze the whole transition. So the story of Eeklo started already in 1999 when 3 public tenders were launched for the building of wind turbines. And special for these public tenders was that it didn't only focus on the classic criteria of financial gains and technical qualities, but it also demanded a minimal of 50% direct citizens' participation and added value projects. And I know that this is a district heating network conference, so I'm not in the wrong place, but actually these principles of energy democracy are very similar and applicable and also scalable to both district heating networks and heat pumps and solar boilers, etc. But what we saw after the construction of these 3 first cooperative wind turbines was what I like to call the cooperative effect. And that's, you can divide this in 2 parts. on the one hand, we didn't face any opposition against these three building permits. So it means that while in the rest of Flanders, half of all projects are being blocked or cancelled by neighborhood lawsuits and protests, none of those oppositions we faced in Eeklo. And the idea behind it is actually one of the neighbors once explained it to me as followed. It's like everybody is constantly annoyed by cars being parked in their street, except for when it's their own car. And it's exactly the same with wind turbines. So from the moment that people have the idea that they own a piece of these wind turbines, they will actually start to look at them in a totally different way. And on top of that, we also saw that only after 3 years, all the people that were involved in this project, their consumption level dropped by a half. So these 3 cooperative wind turbines, after 3 years, were already producing for 6 classical ones. And after another, I think, 5 years, 5 more were added, again, without any noticeable opposition. Until in 2014, the higher government, they saw this democratic support for wind turbines, and they knocked on our door and asked, well, can we build another 14? And so what we had to do at that point was we said, okay, sure, we're not going to say immediately no to this, but we want to safeguard this democratic support. And we want to implement all the things and all the experiences in a concrete plan. And this concrete plan was, on the one hand, based on a closed-end scenario, and on the other hand, a solid spatial planning and our democratic support model. And this is the result of a participatory trajectory long before permits were handed in. So we went to the neighborhoods and we asked them not if they were against or in favor of wind turbines, but what it would take for them not to pursue their legal means in lawsuits, etc. And we reached an agreement together with the neighbors and also with the energy companies that 50% of the whole project should be opened up for direct participation. And on top of this, every turbine every year would contribute 5,000 euro in a local climate fund and 5,000 euro in a neighborhood fund. And again, all these 14 wind turbines got their permit without any noticeable opposition. Remember again that in the rest of Flanders and Belgium, 50% of all projects are blocked. And so this means that these wind turbines got their permit in 2017, and in 2020, actually, you see that Eeklo was already producing 130% of its total electricity usage by its own renewable energy. So, and why is this?
Because, sorry, Bob, sorry, if you say 130 means you sell 30% of your energy because you overproduce. You produce more than the city of Eeklo needs.
On a yearly basis, yes, but of course you have the balancing mechanism, and of course, unfortunately, because the higher authorities have been reluctant to accept our local conditions, some of the energy companies have also been proving to be equally reluctant to comply with the conditions and the agreements that we made long before the permits were handed in. And so we are still in long and dragging negotiations because the higher authorities haven't recognized our local conditions, but the results are there, they're undeniable. So it's a pity that we don't get the backup from the higher authorities. So, but why is this important for district heating? Is that the same principles you can also apply to district heating networks. It is the same principle of participation that will allow so we're talking about adaptability and the willingness to comply. I'm not in favor at all of making it mandatory, but about convincing people. And I don't want to heat up the discussion about district heating, but it's like the whole vaccine, all the motivational experts you've seen in how to vaccinate people. It is about first you convince people, and in the end, the ones that are still reluctant to get involved with this whole district heating network, well, they will be faced with the reality that at one point the gas company will stop investing in their gas network. And so it's the motivation aspect that you need to take care of, and this is provided by the same principles of this of participation. And so what did we do is, except for besides the financial part and the technical part, we made a not more than usual price principle, so that the district heating network could never price their heating or could never put a price on their heating that exceeds the price of gas. Of course, 30% should be with direct participation, and of course we need this whole story, this energy transition story, to be about a lot more than just the district heating network, but because at that point you're only switching from one energy company to another energy company, so it needs to be more than just paying company X money instead of F. Yeah, so these are actually in general, the principles in which we built this new legal framework for district heating, because the legal framework for district heating is absent in Belgium, and yeah, these are also the same principles that we also applied to solar projects and actually also to energy poverty projects. So it works. It can be applied, especially also to district heating networks.
Thank you so much. Oh, Eeklo is not special. Can you please read this for us?
Okay, yeah, that's actually the last slide. And that's from the idea that I don't think that we are special. I mean, we are a small city, as you mentioned before, without a budget, a specific energy budget, and only with a part-time employee. So I really have the feeling that if we can pull this off, actually anybody can. So if you want more information on how we organize these tenders, actually just contact us, and we're happy to share all the documents and all the legal work we have made in the past few years.
Thank you so much, and I love that the person you called Mr. Tesla, but this is another theme. Thank you so much for explaining us this lighthouse example of Eeklo, and I just want also to give the precision that you used to be a deputy mayor of the city, and you're still a councillor for energy questions, and you just proved that you are very good in this field. Thank you, Bob. We will talk a little bit more about this, especially the legal framework. I have some questions, but first, please, let's first listen to Lise Debbaut, also from Belgium, but this time of the city of Bruges. Lise, you are a project leader for SHIFFT, supported by the EU Interact Fund. You are a former teacher in geography and science, and for the last 2 years, you have been member of the internal climate team of Bruges. With your input, you will highlight the power of the citizens in the heat strategy of your city. It's up to you. We are listening.
Thanks, Annette. I will share my screen. You can see it right now.
Absolutely perfect.
My screen?
You can go. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Perfectly. First slide.
So I'm quite new in the business in this theme and subjects. So I just tell you more what I've learned as well the last 2 years. So if I may, I added just one extra slide because I wanted to start to tell you a little bit more about the heat plan that was developed in Bruges by Cuffe Solutions Consultancy in Belgium. So it was developed based on the total cost of ownership. And you can see the heat zone plan. And you can see different colors. And the red color means that a collective sustainable heat solutions in all scenarios, so even with an ambitious renovation pace, has the lowest total cost of ownership. As you can see, this is the case for almost the whole city center, the egg of Bruges, we said. The total cost of ownership of the collective solutions included also the cost to put a heating network in the ground in a historical city with narrow streets and an overcrowded underground. And the yellow color stands for a deep renovation of the dwellings and installation of an individual fossil-free heat solution. The orange color means that there were different outcomes in different scenarios. For example, a different pace of renovation. So the kind of fossil-free heating there depends on the context. For example, if there are new projects or a street has to be broken up. So that's our heat zoning plan. But we didn't wait for the output of the heat plan. We have also started with a feasibility study of district heating in the city center. So different clusters with a high demand and a lot of city buildings were defined. And there was calculated what would be the CO2 reduction, what would be the costs to cluster them and to connect them to a heating network coming from the waste incinerator, because there is a waste incinerator, IVBO in Bruges, with already a very long history of heating networks. But I will tell you more about but I didn't maybe. Yes, okay. About our co-creation process, the power of the neighborhood, and in Dutch we say buurtkracht. Just before the crisis, the COVID crisis, we started with the co-creation process buurtkracht, and we organized a call to all the citizens to sign up if they are interested to start neighborhood renovations in a bottom-up process. We all know, Astrid mentioned as well, a renovation process has a lot of dropouts, dropout moments, a lot of hurdles and a lot of barriers like mistrust against the contractor, mistrust against the civil servant, unawareness. For example, what can I do? Heating my house, has this something to do anything with the climate change or the climate problem? Complexity is another example of the renovations. So there are a lot of reasons to drop out. So as a consequence of all these barriers, a lot of people drop out during this renovation process or simply don't start. And we wanted to help these people, and with Buurtkracht, based on the Dutch organization Buurkracht, we want to initiate collective renovations resulting in an increased pace of renovation, which is necessary in Bruges, because if we want to reach a renovation pace of 3% a year, we have to renovate deeply almost 2,000 dwellings per year.
Whoa.
Yes. The curve and the figure on the right up shows a technological acceptation and the innovation adoption of citizens. So in the first place, we were looking for in this project for pioneers and early adapters, ambassadors who want to develop a neighborhood team to trigger the large majority, and what's in the red circle in this process of renovation. So the city facilitates a process where possible. So when possible, we go, for example, to the neighborhoods and organize together with the ambassadors energy parties based on, maybe, I don't know if every country knows this, but the Tupperware parties with the plastic boxes. So we can organize energy parties. It's organized by the ambassadors, but the city is facilitating where possible. We will develop, for example, a neighborhood plan as well, facilitate group purchases. There's a lot is possible, but we're just facilitators, and it's the people in the neighborhood itself who is doing the real work. So unfortunately, the coronavirus didn't make it possible to have contact with a lot of citizens, but yeah, we were already hoping for a couple of months to restarting, slowly restarting, but we have now other actions I will tell you more about. So it's obvious that the pace of renovation has to increase strongly. So we want to achieve this in Bruges by facilitating this and to tackle not only the neighborhood renovations, but to tackle as well the key moments during lifetime of a dwelling, for instance, new residents, the sale of a house, for example. So the goal of Buurtkracht is initiate bottom-up neighborhood renovations in an integral way. So it's not only heat, maybe we can tackle some other problems in the neighborhood as well. So maybe there's another problem that's more important, but if we tackle this problem, we can just use this way to tackle other barriers as well. The infographic in the right is a tool for all citizens where they can check what still has to be done in their dwelling to decrease the heat demand to the fullest. So, and in the middle, you can see a scan of a house. And we are lucky because this night and this evening, there will be a wall scanner because the weather conditions are well today. We are already waiting for more than 6 months. But the wall scanner of our intercommunal organization will driving to the streets of Bruges in one of the neighborhoods of Buurtkracht, the power of the neighborhood, who already signed up for to help and to want to be informed, and they were very happy to maybe to be one of the first fossil-free neighborhoods, or maybe almost fossil-free. So. There will be a scan of the walls of all these houses to look which house can be insulated stronger, for example, or where thermal bridges can be defined. And this measure can stimulate citizens as well to take action to lower the heat demand of their dwelling. And next year
Sorry
as well,
to interrupt you just for a second,
yes.
please. It is very interesting, but we have to go, if you want to have the chance to discuss a little bit, we have to go a little bit quicker.
Yeah,
do you think you
just one
can wrap it
sentence.
up in? Yes, wonderful.
Okay.
No, just wrap it up in 2 or 3 minutes would be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to say that next year we will start with an external organization as well, together with another city in West Flanders, who will help us and unburden the citizen in the process of renovation as well. So to be, we are looking for one SPOC, a single point of contact who will do the whole renovation process, who will take the citizens with them and will renovate their dwellings. So that was it for
Thank you
Bruges.
so much. I'm sorry that I rushed you a little bit, but this is just to have the occasion to ask you some questions also in the chat. Do not hesitate to ask your questions or give your recommendations or whatever. I'm very happy to include them in our discussion. So it is very interesting what you said, because we already know that the involvement of the citizen is definitely key to make a difference for the energy transition. But what I like very much, because we're looking here for best practice, is definitely this idea of neighborhood ambassadors. I like this very much because, as we heard before, to go from door to door, for example, for energy cities, this is quite human resources intensive. It costs a lot of money also to do this groundwork. So the idea to use neighbors as ambassadors, so they do the job in a certain way and get their neighbors involved, I think this is a very good practice we have to have in mind. And I got also this collective approach you're doing in Bruges also, who seems definitely the only way to make this happen. So let me, if you allow me first, I would like to ask a question to Bob. Bob, you talked about the legal framework you had to put in place for your lighthouse city project in Eeklo, or not lighthouse, windhouse project. So what exactly did you needed to change for the legal framework to make this energy transition happen? Please give us a little bit more details. I think a lot of other people who listen here can be maybe inspired by your example.
Yeah, thanks. At this point, there's no legal framework for the development of district heating networks in Flanders. So the development of district heating networks is still limited to either new urban developments or, on the other hand, historical networks. So we have in Eeklo, in the north of our city, we have a big waste incinerator that is still losing 70% of all its heating through the just emitting it in the air, and that's enough to to cut a third of our carbon footprint. So what did we do is, because there was at that point no legal structure, we made our own by looking at our public domain as a concession, and it's actually just like you would give a concession for opening up a cafeteria by a private owner, but just a bit more broad and more complex. And yeah, we spent nine years, but actually in making all the legal aspects and putting and writing out the contracts. But actually, it helped in opening up a new space in the market for the construction of district heating networks. And up until this point, I haven't seen it yet in the rest of Belgium. So I think there's a legal void at this point. That we try to fill. But what I also need to say is that it took us 9 years, and so a lot of other district heating networks were started later than us, but have already more connections in the ground than we have. So it
always needs a pioneer, Bob. So you are one of the first one, and you show the way to the other one. This is exactly what's happened. Astrid, I also would like to come back to you with the city of Rotterdam, where we have a lot of heat right now, but absolutely not related to district heating, but more to corona revolts in your city. When you listen to Lise and this idea of, for example, getting these neighborhood ambassadors involved in the process of getting the citizen participation raising, do you think this is a good idea?
Yes, definitely. I think I do think it depends a bit on every neighborhood. So you have these neighborhoods where there's a huge amount of activity, and you can just sort of, well, the early movers, so you just have to show them a little bit and help them, and whoop, they go. But you also have neighborhoods where a little bit more is needed. So it depends a bit on where you are. But we all know that your neighborhood or your neighbor is the best example for people to move, because they trust the neighbor. So that's really the benefit of having a local ambassador. So it's very good to use them. I do think in the end you also need to look at the bigger system, because if you have all these little patchwork solutions in the end, how is the total system going to work, and how are you making sure that people are not left out? So I do think that above that, so it's sort of a very basic and important process, you also need to have the process of how do you make sure that the total energy transition is inclusive, so everybody can be part of it, and it's a just, so you have a system where everybody is there's a fair share of cost and benefits, and so I do think to a certain point you also need to have that sort of top-down orchestration of the transition, but without I think the citizens and engagement, and I think the example Lise gave is a perfect one. It's not going to work, because people just not
absolutely
are not going to move.
It needs to be a kind of alchemy between top-down and bottom-up, I think so.
Yes.
Absolutely. And again, it has to be totally individual for the local problems and the local framework where there are, what is the political motivation, what are the local problems or maybe barriers and obstacles to move forward in this energy transition. Let's use the last 7 minutes we have in this roundtable discussion. I would like you very quickly, the three of you, to give me, after your experience, even in Liz's case, it's just a 2-year experience, and in your case, Astrid, 20 years, doesn't matter. What are the biggest obstacles you are confronted right now in this pushing through the energy transition? What are the biggest obstacles in your mind? Let's make a round. Let's start with Bob. Bob, you were involved in this energy transition. What was it? Was the legal framework? It was the motivation? It was the money? It was the cost? It was the political will? What were the main obstacles for this this successful energy transition of Eeklo?
Yeah, I think it's the legal framework. So, and that's actually
very important.
If I can get back to the last poll that you had on the Slido, where everybody was saying everybody was with the focus on the local authorities and less on the national and European level. Actually,
zero on the European.
Zero on the European level. I don't think that's then at that point you give too much responsibility for local authorities. Like for us, the fact that we developed the legal framework, okay, yeah, that was because the carrot was big enough, because the heating from the waste incinerator can provide for the whole city. But actually, it is work that we shouldn't be doing. This legal framework is actually very specifically one of the things that the higher government should do. Or
absolutely, this is not a citizen initiative, of course.
Yeah,
of course,
no,
you're totally right.
They should actually, sorry to interrupt. They should actually just give space and clear the space for local authorities to work in.
Absolutely, but this legal framework is without any doubt again a key factor. And I think this maybe also could be pushed forward by initiatives like the Celsius Initiative or the Energy Cities to make it, how we can say, repeatable. If you know how you changed your framework to give these concessions, in your case it took for 9 years, maybe the next city can only take 3 years and the next time only 1 year, because we get inspired by examples like this. Lisa, I'm turning to you and the Bruges example. What would you say has been the biggest obstacles the city met right now on the way to energy transition?
There's always a big problem. That's money. That's the first one.
Financial, okay.
For the citizens, well, because I just had to say that the neighborhoods who signed up for the Buurtkracht, for the power of the neighborhood, these were neighborhoods where the people has to invest themselves, because these were neighborhoods in the yellow part of the heat zone plan, so where they have to act individually. So there we wanted to help them. Another big problem is tackling the underground in Bruges, because we have already a heating network. Yes, has to be. It's just overcrowded, the underground. There are a lot of. There's already a sewerage system and a lot of things in the underground, and it's very difficult because a couple of streets have to be. There is a need for unseparated sewerage system as well. And another one is a search for other heat sources, because our waste incinerator has enough heat to heat 10% of the heat who is used in Bruges. So this will this is another problem to tackle, because we have to find place as well.
Diversification of the heat resources, right? Very good. Yes. So we have only legal framework, financial insufficiency, geological problems, maybe diversification of the energy sources. Astrid, what you can add on this blacklist of obstacles we have to overcome?
Yes, well, good points, all of them, obviously. Well, I would say that who does what. So there's this clear definition.
Clean.
And this has to do with the legal framework, obviously. So who decides on what, and also what are the values we pursued? Are we when we talk about affordability, do we talk about the same thing? So this whole idea, because it is a big chain of different kind of players. Where everybody has a role. So for example, the underground and how to organize it. This is a role for the city, at least in the Netherlands it is. So they have to have their rules and to put it down, but they need to know what do heating companies need then, and what do water companies need then. So you need to. So it's really a very big network of ideas and values and goals, and I think being more transparent about it would help to get clear rules and move forward. But you need, as Bob said, the legal framework, because you need to put roles and responsibilities in the right spot, but then also work towards it. And I do still think that trust in the end, because you need to have the partners. The willingness to invest from a heating company is about trusting that the city is going to do the right thing in making space, and trusting that the legal framework works in the way it should be worked and it's being handled. So it's also about the whole chain, I would say.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it comes down to trust, absolutely. But so we will add at the list a clear responsibility, transparency. We heard all this morning, sharing of data, for example. And again, this trust word, I think it can englobe the whole process. It's a trust upbuilding process who is needed here. So we do not want to stay, of course, with this negative list of this blacklist. Thanks, first of all, very much for the three of you to share your knowledge, and thanks you for the time for this roundtable, who is already over. Now it is 4 o'clock. And you, chère audience, everybody who's listened to us, you have now the possibility to give your solutions to this blacklist in form of interactive breakout rooms. There are 3 of them. They will show up on your screen right now. The first room is about policy perspective. The second one about customers and utilities perspective. And the third one about stakeholder engagement. Please feel free to join the discussion you are interested and you wish to contribute to. There is a moderator waiting in each room for you. And the key takeaways from the discussion in the next 45 minutes you will make there will be briefly summarized afterwards in our last plenary session. So please join the breakout room by clicking on the button in front of you, who will show up right now on your Zoom screen. And if you need any help and there is no button or whatever, don't hesitate to write it quickly in the chat and we will help you to join the room you want. I just repeat: room number 1, policy perspective; room number 2, customers and utilities perspective; and the third one is stakeholder engagement. So I wish you a fantastic and successful discussion, and we will see us back here for the last 15 minutes at 4:45. I wish you good discussion. See you.
And we were joined by the representatives of energy community of Rotterdam, so the Netherlands, and Eeklo in Belgium. So we had a very international discussion in this sense. Our talk focused on the question, what's the role of energy democracy in the energy transition, and actually how democratic are some policies. From the German experience, we saw that district heating is considered democratic as such, because when in Baden-Württemberg they develop district heating systems in towns and villages, they do meet people and talk to them. So it's people who make the final decision. They also have a mandatory heat planning process. So we discussed how democratic is that. And we realized that local authorities are, in order to implement this mandatory heat planning, are forced to start a dialogue and a democratic discussion within the city. So bottom line, we can conclude that it is democratic. On the example of Strasbourg, we looked at how the requirement to connect to district heating is democratic. And we also heard about solar obligation. So make a photovoltaic mandatory for all new and refurbished buildings. So very interesting topics. In terms of how far we have gone in the process of energy transition in those two countries, we saw very interesting examples on bioenergy villages in Germany and also solar energy villages. We saw that Strasbourg is very ambitious in their energy plans. So they have a double target for 2030 and 2050 on increasing the renewable energy production. And they count on district heating and solar energy to contribute to these targets. And regarding the question, what remains to be done, what needs to be done, Jörg highlighted the need of thinking globally and acting regionally, because he represents a region of Baden-Württemberg. He also suggested to make citizens part of the decision-making process and also to own the system. So we talked a bit about citizen-owned enterprises. There was also an urge to work together, so between cooperatives, municipalities, and big enterprises to create special purpose vehicles in some cases that could boost the development of district heating in cities. And obviously, we concluded that the legal framework needs to be adapted for that. Regarding Strasbourg, they mentioned that they need to double the number of homes connected to district heating. So they are going to expand the current network and massively create new networks by also reducing heat demand at the same time. They are planning to introduce district cooling, which from the energy efficiency perspective will also make the cost of heating more attractive. And they need to improve renewable energy infrastructure, especially looking at the heat recovery and local production of renewable electricity. So the bottom line was that as long as the process of implementing this probably not democratic obligations is democratic, as long as the city council, which was elected by the citizens, is in charge of implementing this policy and also organizes a participatory process by, for instance, consultations. As long as this process is made in a democratic way, people are willing to accept these obligations. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Oksana. It was passionate what all you had to discuss in only 45 minutes. Thank you very much for this wonderful resume. And yeah, it sounds that we are on the good democratic path for our transition. I will now turn to Madsen, who was the moderator in room number 2, and he focused on consumers and utilities perspective. He is a strategic communicator at IMCG Sweden. He leads communication and dissemination towards Celsius member cities and Celsius city supporters. So please, Mats, tell us what was key in your discussion group.
Thank you. Shut off the sound of the computer. Yeah, please. Thank you. Yes, we listened to Nathalie Fransson, project manager at the Swedish Environmental Institute, IVL, presenting conclusions from the project Reward Heat and a study of customer engagement. Daniel Lundqvist, senior advisor, district energy market at Swedenergy, which is the association of energy utilities in Sweden. Daniel told us about the price dialogue that Swedish energy companies are having with their customers. And we also listened to Sam Oxenar, project manager at rescoop.eu, a federation of citizen energy cooperatives. He talked about citizen-led renovations and what role heating and cooling holds. So Natalie, her presentation was about the Reward Heat project and where they interviewed consumers on which changes they are willing to do to make the energy system greener, from giving the control of the heat to the utilities to being willing to pay more for green energy. And it turned out that people they don't want to pay more, but they could be able, like more than 50% are actually willing to pay more for green energy, green heating and cooling. Another important thing is also to have an even temperature in their homes. These responders, they are positive to district heating, and they are also connected to district heating. So it's I think that within Reward Heat there are a lot of things to learn to create stakeholder consumer engagement. Daniel, he said that trust must be built to be able to get the consumers engagement. And this is not something that happens overnight. It takes time. So Daniel told us about the price dialogue that the Swedish energy utilities have each year with the major customers. And one of the main reasons to have this is for transparency. It's not a negotiation, it's more to just make them aware of why prices are changing. So he showed a really interesting thing with the acceptance among the participants, and they compared it to those who didn't participate. The acceptance was much higher when they actually understood why the prices are changing, often upwards, but sometimes down. So one example he gave was about the plan to phase out local coal plants. But due to the customers' demands in the dialogue process, the district heating company decided to speed up the process and replaced it 2 years earlier than it was planned. Yeah. So, and then we talked with Sam, and he gave us business models for energy cooperatives and showed the multitude of cooperatives in energy in Europe. And the main point to maintain energy cooperatives, according to him, it's to have local benefits in investing in, for instance, wind turbines, and the money should go back to the community. Collaboration between the local actors is really important too, and also to have it in a democratic community ownership. He gave us examples from the Netherlands, something called Buurtwarmte, and it's about sustainable neighborhood heating for private home owners on a low to mid temperature. I'm trying to pronounce this correctly, but in Wageningen, a city in the Netherlands, they had a joint venture of 400 houses, and together with the municipality and a heating provider. So this is something that's going on right now there. And also another example from Ghent in Belgium, where they have district heating, and it's been organized in a cooperative way, focusing on investment in renewables. Sam also said that there's a huge potential to get citizens involved in the energy transition. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. Cut your mic now, yes, because we are near to each other. Otherwise, we have this Larsen, as it's called. Thank you so much. This is so interesting. Yeah, and when you talk about the price, maybe it is also that the price maybe rises, but if it's a fair price and people know why it's fair, the acceptance will be greater. Trust, of course, always we come back to trust. This is certainly really a key element of the whole the structure for energy transition. Thank you so much for this interesting resume. And just to remind all of you who is still watching, you will find, of course, all this in a written way on the Celsius City EU website. One day that we will make a kind of wrap up to give you the essentials of this Celsius Summit, so you can read and get inspiring pieces of information on the website later. So let's turn to room number 3, who was about stakeholder engagement. And the moderator was Amélie Ancel. She works for Energy Cities on heating and cooling topics, both from a project and a policy perspective. And in her personal life, she lives in a small city in Belgium, and where she's also involved in a participatory council. Shinzi is convinced that the role of municipality and citizens' involvements are key for a fair transition. I think we can agree about this. So, Amélie, what did your group discuss about?
Thanks a lot, Annette. So we had 2 presentations, one by Paulius Martinkus from the Vilnius District Heating Company, and the other one by Laura Utu-de-Schriver from the city of Helsinki, because they both organized original challenges to find decarbonization solutions for So in Helsinki, they wanted to decarbonize the heating system, and in Vilnius, so there were 4 topics. There was the heating and cooling topic, circular economy, green data, and green transport. So both of them organized this challenge to try and gather different experts, different profiles together to team up from everywhere in the world to put together their knowledge and try to find original solutions to this problem of decarbonization. So basically, we had 3 main findings, let's say, or 3 main key takeaways. And the first one is that the transition requires a systemic approach. So it means that you need to look for synergies between sectors, and it's impossible to just work in silos because it won't work out. So the key is to favor the discussion, and to also, even if you work in one specific field, it is very important to then put forward and put it to the discussion of the stakeholders to say, okay, this is what I have, can you please give me your input? And this can be done through an open platform, for instance, that's what is done in Vilnius, or through public events, for instance, in Helsinki. After their challenge, they try to put up together a roadmap for decarbonization, and they organize public events where they try and gather very different stakeholders from different sectors to come together and give their inputs to have as much as possible a proper solution to offer, which can stick to the reality. So the second thing, which is very important and quite challenging, is also to keep the spirits high of these stakeholders that you want to engage, and finding an original way of involving them, and which can also be seen as a democratic way, because you give them a true word to have, is very key for that. So, for instance, it is also very important for them to see that, okay, you can come and give your inputs and what you get from it, because it's not just like, okay, you give inputs and then we take it and that's all. It's that some of your inputs can lead then to pilot projects and etc., which will benefit not only your company, but also the city. So this is also very key to find a way to motivate and to keep the spirits high. And finally, what is very interesting to see is that basically, even though these 2 projects were meant to find local solutions, one in Helsinki and one in Vilnius, because you open it to an international crowd of experts, it will always go beyond your own borders. And it's also a way of sharing this idea that energy democracy, by bringing together stakeholders, can also be important in other cities. And what is interesting to see is that because of these original projects and these original processes, they've been contacted by many other cities who try to see, okay, how can we replicate this, even though it cannot be 100% stuck or copied, but you can still find ideas and see that, okay, this works. And actually talking between different sectors and involving stakeholders is a very interesting process. So that's it for our group.
Thank you so much, Emily, for this last result of the last group of work. I mean, we said too many things today that I wrap it up all in one sentence, but let me try it. We need something like a democratic frame on all levels, a systemic approach, a nice business plan, time enough to build trust and to involve everybody bottom up and top down. I tried it. It is a kind of in one sentence what we discussed today. I hope you get your keys out of this. So thank you very much to all of you for your active participation. It was a pleasure to host this first half day of the Celsius Summit. Tomorrow you will go on. It will start at 9:30. And then you will talk about implementation aspects of the energy democracy. Another roundtable discussion will focus on collaboration within and between cities, because yes, one word I forgot in my sentence is networking. This is what we're doing here, but I think it needs to be spread out much more over Europe, that the good example can voyage over the borders, and that you can get inspired from each other's examples, obstacles and solutions, of course. So then there will always be 3 workshops tomorrow. It's about the Fit for 55 package to understand what's there inside for the cities, also how to implement waste heat recovery projects. We often talked about this idea of getting heat from the waste burning, but to have some more details and some more practical input about this part, and also how to implement geothermal heat in a city and remain democratic. This will be the second part of the Celsius Summit will finish tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. And please visit the website celsiuscity.eu, city in singular, and of course feel free to continue the discussion on all social media you're using #Celsius Summit. That's all for today. Thank you so much for your participation. Wherever you are, stay safe, stay warm, and have a delightful evening. I say for my last word will be in 3 languages. Bye bye, au revoir, and auf Wiedersehen.